Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the public hearing for Monday, July 18th, 2022. Before we start the public hearing, I have an announcement to read out, or a statement. This council meeting is being convened in order to hold public hearings on land use matters. This hearing, the public and anyone who believes their interest in property is affected may speak or present written submissions. Everyone will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard. No one should feel discouraged from making their views known. Those of you who wish to speak or have registered with the city clerk should, after being recognized by the chair, begin by clearly stating your name and your address. If you have also provided a written submission, please make this known at the beginning of your presentation. All written submissions will be retained by the city clerk and will form part of the record of the hearing. Each speaker may address the hearing a maximum of twice. The length of your first presentation will be limited to a maximum of 10 minutes. Your comments must be relevant and not obstruct the hearing. Any additional presentation, which must be on new information, will be limited to 3 minutes. Members of council may ask questions of you following your presentation. However, the function of council members during a public hearing is to listen to the views of the public, not to debate the merits of matters with citizens. Any debate by members of council will occur at the subsequent vote. The order of proceedings for each item will normally be as follows. First of all, the city clerk will briefly describe the matter under consideration. Secondly, the applicant or their agent will be invited to make a brief presentation of up to 10 minutes. Thirdly, the city clerk will identify any written submissions received. Fourthly, oral submissions from the public will be heard and any further written submissions will be received. And finally, the hearing will be closed and matters may be considered. Please note the delegations must present in a respectful manner without interference or comment from the audience. City Council is committed to ensuring a safe and respectful environment and supports the rights of the community to bring comments forward. Please observe these rules, and if you have any concerns with the manner in which the hearing is conducted, direct your comments to the chair. Madam Clerk, the first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 1, Richmond Zoning Amendment Bylaw 10379 for the location of 9231 Kilby Street. The applicant is DC Limited, Dinjal Construction Limited, and the purpose is to rezone the subject property from the single detached RS1E zone to the single detached RS2A zone to permit the property to be subdivided to create 2 single-family lots with vehicle access from the rear lane. First reading was on June 13th.
All right, is the applicant here this evening? Did you wish to make a presentation or just await questions? No, I'll wait. All right, any written submissions?
None, Your Worship.
All right, anybody wishing to make a submission on this item on the floor? All right, we'll ask for, okay, action is moved, second and third, and it's seconded. Any discussion on that? All right, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. The next item, Madam Clerk.
Item 2, Richmond Zoning Amendment Bylaw 10380. The location is 9271 Kilby Street. The applicant is Parm Dinjal, and the purpose is to rezone the subject property from the single detached RS1E zone to the single detached RS2A zone to permit the property to be subdivided to create 2 single-family lots with vehicle access from the rear lane. First reading was on June 13th.
All right, is the same applicant again? Do you want to just await questions? Okay, and written submissions.
None, Your Worship.
All right, anybody wishing to speak to this item on the floor?
Second, third.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Third item, Madam Clerk.
Item 3, Richmond Zoning Amendment Bylaw 10387. The location is 11460 Williams Road. The applicant is Jude De Silva, and the purpose is to rezone the subject property from the single detached RS1E zone to the compact single detached RC2 zone to permit the property to be subdivided to create 2 single-family lots with vehicle access from the rear lane. First reading was on June 27th.
All right, is the applicant here on this one?
Yes.
Oh, you're on the line.
On the phone.
Oh, yes, I've got a note of that. I understand you just want to be available for questions?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Any written submissions?
None, Your Worship.
Anybody wishing to discuss this matter or delegate on this matter on the floor?
Move second, third.
All right, so that's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, any opposed? That is carried. Then we have the next item, Madam Clerk.
The next is item 4. This is Richmond Zoning Amendment Bylaw 10336 for the location of 6831 Gray Bar Road, 20455 Dyke Road, 20911 Dyke Road, 7500 Number 9 Road, and Lot A as noted on the agenda. The applicant is Farrell Estates Limited, and the purpose is to discharge Land Use Contract 127 from 6831 Gray Bar Road and to rezone the subject properties from Industrial and Marina Z117, Gray Bar Road, East Richmond, Industrial Business Park IB1, and Light Industrial IL to Industrial Business Park and Marina Z120, Gray Bar Road, East Richmond, to permit a multi-phase light industrial development. First reading was on June 27th.
All right, Council McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. As per Section 100 of the Community Charter in the Local Government Act, I will declare a conflict of interest due to the fact of my husband being the applicant.
All right, thank you. We will excuse you then. All right, now, is the applicant here? Did you wish to make a presentation, sir?
Great question.
Sure, come on forward. So what we asked you to do is to introduce yourself and tell us what you got on your mind. Could I trouble you to sit in the other one because we got the camera that's pointed there?
No problem. Terry McPhail, Farrell Estates in Shelter Island Marina. Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors, for giving me this opportunity to speak here. Farrell Estates and McPhails have been operating in Richmond since 1959. Shelter Island, under the same ownership group, has been operating in Richmond for almost 50 years, having been established in 1975. When CNR put their underutilized rail corridor up for sale, it was an opportunity for Farrell Estates and Shelter Island Marina to add warehouse space, which is badly needed in the Richmond and Metro Vancouver area, for both the general market as well as servicing the expanded Boatyard, which our Boatyard is one of the largest in BC and expanding it from 17 to 22 acres. The proposed light industrial development consists of 5 phases. However, only 2 phases are going to be planned in the foreseeable future. The Boatyard is a successful, thriving business with future capital expenditures, including future gantry cranes, additional businesses moving to Shelter Island. I won't get into who they all are, and to help support the Boatyard. Concerns were brought up about the Boatyard would cease at some time in the future. I can assure you this is not the case. Shelter Island is one of the most modern boatyard facilities on the coast, recently receiving our 4 anchor rating from the Georgia Strait Alliance Clean Marine BC Boating Program and Eco certification. Our gantry cranes are modern, costing over $4 million. Our long-term plans are for the continuation of the Boatyard and the Marina with the 2 new buildings, providing much-needed industrial space that will support the marine industry and complement the services currently offered in the Boatyard. This is the reason the warehouses are facing the Boatyard and not the reverse. Additional concerns are brought up that the warehouse development might impact Tugboat Annie's Pub. I can again assure you this is not the case. It's named after my mom. This is the reason we purposely left the pub building on a separate lot. In addition, this building houses all of Farrell Estates and Shelter Island Marina head offices, which are currently undergoing renovations as the pub did last year. Other concerns are brought up about the trees along the dike, and at this time there's no intentions to proceed with phases 3, 4, and 5. It should be noted that this building will also bring added amenities to the existing Boatyard, such as additional parking for the patrons in the Boatyard, which is very limited, lighting, EV charging stations, and so on. It should be noted that we were not required to rezone this property in order to develop any of these buildings. All the properties were zoned light industrial at the time we purchased off CNR, and they were already zoned light industrial. The purpose of the rezoning and consolidation of the lands together was twofold. Firstly, to maximize the industrial footprint of buildings 1 and 2 by utilizing the hydro right-of-way on our existing property for building parking and boatyard parking. We were the logical buyer of the CN property. Any other purchaser would have required to place parking on the CN site, resulting in a narrow building and a much smaller footprint. Secondly, the amalgamation of the lands allows us to clean up the zonings, rid ourselves of the expiring land use contracts, while creating one site-specific zoning provides greater clarity for ourselves, Feral Estates, the Boatyard, and the City of Richmond. Traffic will be monitored through the construction and traffic management plan required by the City of Richmond. Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors, for this opportunity.
All right. Do you have any timeline for going with the final 3 buildings? Whatever you call it.
It won't be in my time frame, so it'll be more in my son's, but I have no intention of that. This boatyard is very busy, very successful, quite profitable. So there's no plans at this time to even look at those ones. This is why we agreed with the city staff, because I could have built under the existing zoning with that. In agreement for doing this, they put a no-build requirement on the southern 50 meters. So at this time, I have no plans even looking at that the next, I can't speak forever, but 10 or 20 years or further.
All right, Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody, sorry. Thank you for your presentation. I was pleased to see that only 2 phases are going forward, the 2 buildings on CN. And I did some research. You're right, Shelter Island is one of the largest marinas in BC. Given the fact that there is no plan to build buildings 3, 4, and 5, would you be prepared to put a covenant on the property that would commit the boatyard to working and operating in perpetuity?
You know, we've been operating that boatyard in a smaller scale, and we've acquired additional lands over the times and kept expanding the boatyard. I don't want to commit to something that if competitors open another boatyard facilities in Richmond and Vancouver or wherever else and my business goes down, I need the flexibility to look at it, but I can assure you that with the investments we have in there, the requirements to upgrade the dike and storm sewer systems for phases 3, 4, and 5, that there's no intention at this time to do it. So my answer is I would not want to put a covenant on it saying it's tied up, but I don't see this happening in the foreseeable future.
Can I just follow up on that? I did go to the yard today and I spoke to a number of operators in the area, and they tell me there is just nothing that comes close to the Shelter Island Marina with, I think it's a 300-ton hoist, and some of the ships that are in there, I mean, their vessels are too tall to be worked on inside a building, so they're very concerned that the boatyard, if it ever ceases to exist, would significantly affect the fishing industry, certainly the pleasure boat industry, and also the manufacturing industry. And they say that it would be terrible if it ever shut down, and it would detrimentally affect everybody from basically commercial to sport fishing and all that. So when I spoke to the director of BC Boating, Bruce Hain, he told me that he was unaware of phases 3, 4, and 5, well, buildings 3, 4, and 5 in the second phase. Would you be prepared to go out to the stakeholders that have a significant stake in the Shelter Island Marina and come to some kind of compromise whereby the boatyard could continue to operate?
Thank you for your question. Please bear in mind that under the existing zoning, I could have built buildings 3, 4, and 5 right now. So there's nothing stopping me under my existing zoning from building it. We choose to have a boatyard there. We want a boatyard. I realize the regional importance of that shipyard, and by all our machines are near new. And looking at purchasing another one, and by the way, our machine's a 200 ton and a 75 ton.
Sorry.
And I've talked to all our stakeholders in our group. They're well aware. I got to keep them all happy. I'm in the business of, we're in the warehouse and tenant business here, and they're all aware of it. I'm working with them all. I agree that they're not going to get big boats inside of there, but keep in mind, like right now, if you want to have a propeller done, you got to put it on a truck, bring it in. If I get a propeller shop in there, they can just take it over by forklift. They need modern facilities in there without having all those Quonset huts that go up there. And if you see the demand for the Quonset huts, I see a significant, a sizable portion of those moving into some of those buildings because they're paying about the same rent for those as they do in a building.
Yeah, I just so you know, I did speak to a number of people, and nobody knew about buildings 3, 4, and 5.
Because there's no plans on ever buildings 3, 4, and 5 in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Mayor Brody.
All right, thank you very much. If you could stick around in case there's any further questions,
Sure.
please.
Thank you.
All right, we have some written submissions, right?
Yes, Your Worship. In addition to previously distributed correspondence, we have one on table from Kai Vernon expressing opposition, expressing concerns.
All right. So as I understand, we've got a couple of delegations signed up to comment. One would be Sharon McGugan. Are you coming forward?
I will, sure.
Yes? All right, so if you could introduce yourself and tell us what's on your mind.
Sharon McGugan, 7411 Ash Street in Richmond. The Garden City Conservation Society objects to the proposed cutting of 110 cottonwood and birch trees at Shelter Island Marina. Here are the reasons. 1, this will be a grievous ecological loss. Tree replacement makes it sound like it's a simple matter to replace one tree for a couple more. But what this really means in this case is to destroy well-established, rich biodiversity and replace it with a sapling that will take decades to grow to any equivalent ecological benefit, if it does at all. Where wildlife is concerned, not all trees are created equal. 2, cottonwood trees and birch trees are valuable for wildlife. Cottonwood trees are, quote, one of the most important wildlife trees in the Western US and Canada, unquote. According to Jim Boderoff, retired forest steward, wildlife biologist, Washington Department of Natural Resources. A wide variety of animals feed on young cottonwood twigs, bark, cambium, which is the growing part of the trunk, and leaves. This includes insects, predatory birds, and mammals. Cottonwoods provide food for birds during snow events because they have large uncovered terminal buds that grow and last through the winter. 3, when cottonwoods age, their usefulness for wildlife increases. Predatory birds use larger, older cottonwoods for roosting, hunting perches, and nesting. Then, when cottonwoods start to die, woodpeckers get busy, creating cavities in them for nests. These cavities are in turn used by over 40 animal species. Smaller openings are even used by some bat species. Richmond is a certified bat-friendly city, so we are, as a community, compelled to ensure that they have homes. 4, nest boxes are a human solution to a lack of nesting cavities. But as local birder Melissa Hafting shares in her CBC First Person Series piece, June 26, 2022, Climate change, with its heat waves, kills baby birds in their nests. She has built swallow boxes in collaboration with the City of Richmond, and they've been placed in city parks. It's a great initiative, but a much better and safer solution would be to ensure that enough trees exist that can provide cavity nests. If birds cannot find a place to nest, the species dies out. How many birds are able to exist in the Shelter Island marinas? 110 cottonwood and birch trees. A very large number. 5. Richmond is situated on the Fraser Estuary, home and resting and feeding place for birds since it was formed, built over the millennia by layer upon layer of sphagnum moss. The place where we live has such an important significance for wildlife, especially birds, that international designations are being given to us. Richmond is considered a key biodiversity area and is soon to be an international biodiversity area. We have a responsibility to the wildlife and birds that call Richmond home. They should be factored into our deliberations. Their needs should be seen to have some importance. We can't only rely on good and caring people building bird boxes to solve the problem of where birds can live. We can do better than that. We could protect what biodiverse habitat we have left with ingenuity and a different way of thinking. 6. Climate change and loss of biodiversity are two of the biggest problems on the planet, and they both drive extinction of species. This is happening in every community. It is happening in Richmond. The proposed destruction of a biodiverse forest fragment at Shady Island, no matter what year it takes place in, is just one more example of how it happens. What ecological rich forest fragment will be next? The riparian area at the front of the development, the one down the block. How can the development plans be adjusted to help our natural world by leaving this biodiverse forest fragment standing? Saving it would mean a lot more than destroying it does. Destroying habitat is business as usual. Saving it instead would be a magnificent action. 7, we live on a floodplain. There are time-tested nature solutions to flooding, such as increasing biodiversity. If you've seen a photo of native plant next to a non-native plant that shows the roots, you'll know the difference. Native plants tend to have very long roots. They go deep into the ground and anchor there and soak up water. Same with trees, and especially trees in natural areas that weren't planted into compacted soil. That's what the cottonwood and birch trees at Shady Island Marina have. They have long roots. Those long roots help in times of flooding. I have a photo of 2 backyards in Richmond taken during the flooding November 2021. Only a low chain-link fence separates the 2 yards. One backyard is biodiverse with trees and bushes and native plants. The other backyard has compressed soil, short grass, no other vegetation. I bet you can guess which yard was completely flooded and which one was not. In conclusion, point 8, 3 billion birds have been lost in North America since the 1970s, and the number one reason is habitat loss. The Garden City Conservation Society thinks this is unacceptable. It's the main reason we're planting the first Miyawaki forest in Western Canada, along with Richmond Senior Secondary's Green Team. Personally, I've had a backyard forest for 40 years in a happy collaboration with the City of Richmond that is home or stopover for hundreds of birds. I know other people in this room and also on the screen. I know these people also welcome birds. You welcome birds into your backyards or your lives in some way. Please find another way to develop, even if it is long into the future, that does not include destruction of biodiverse habitat at Shelter Island Marina. Thank you.
All right, we've got a question from Councillor Day, and it's just a question.
If we could somehow manage to defer this back to staff and take another kick at the can, would your group be willing to work with the developer to find other options that would save, if not all, some of the trees?
We'd love to.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Is there anywhere in the city, sorry, through your worship to the delegate, is there anywhere in the city where cottonwoods and birch are being protected, where you see mature ones like this actually get protected?
Well, I wouldn't know. I don't know where cottonwoods and birch, but just the little bit of research I did to prepare for this talk, I was really astounded at how powerful these trees are for our birds. And I can see that when Shady Island was
Please just answer the question.
Okay.
Was there anywhere in Richmond that you found these trees protected?
No.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
We have a second speaker, a delegate on this matter, Stephanie C., and I think she is online.
Hello.
Please turn on your video.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
okay, 1 second. Hello, is that okay? Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep it short because I have issues with my vocal cords. I was at council when they declared a climate emergency, when they declared their support for the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And I am here partly on behalf of the young people who also supported that fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. From what I understand, this development is going to have EV chargers. It's going to have an eye on sustainable features in the buildings, and I applaud that absolutely. And I believe that through collaboration with the city, this development could be an excellent source of income and activity for people in the city, more than what's already there. However, the cutting of 110 trees, even if they are to be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio, does not seem to be in line with the declaration of a fossil fuel, of a climate emergency, and with the city's plans to reduce fossil fuels, which have been actually really quite impressive and above and beyond what most districts are doing. So I believe that the keeping of this ecosystem, which has been described so richly by the Garden City, sorry, I didn't quite catch the name, the Garden City Society that just spoke. I believe that keeping ecosystems intact is the most fundamental way that we can protect ourselves from rising sea levels. And I noticed in the report that the trees were identified as being dying or frail by an arborist. But I'm not an expert. What I understand about trees is that they continue to be a part of the ecosystem and to be major contributors even after they've fallen down and appear to be dead to us. They are, their roots are still there and they are holding the soil. They provide breeding ground for bugs and fungi for the next generation of trees. And I really question if replanting with new trees can offer the same sort of livable ecosystem that the current trees do. So I would really love to see this collaboration that has been mentioned. Richmond is so good at collaborating with developers. I visited the Alexandra District Energy facility last week, and I was just amazed at what the city and people and working in those buildings and the developers have put together, and how that's expanding across the city. And isn't this another great opportunity to start looking into what can be done in waterfront areas? So it's probably a different type of energy production that is possible there. And maybe it's emerging technology that is somewhere off in the future. But I think that's what should be looked at. And the current plans may need another look by city staff. Okay, thank you.
Right.
I fully support the letter sent by the sustainability teams. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? Yes, sir. Anyone else wanting to speak on this item? So we'll know. All right. Go ahead, sir.
Jerome Dickey, 299280 Glen Ellen Drive, Richmond. I understand 110 trees are in conflict with the proposed development, as you've heard here. I understand a few of these will be relocated, but the majority will not. Let's think about that. 110 fairly large, mature trees in a green space. What long-term guarantee is there for protection of these trees? Richmond's tree protection bylaw, 8057, prohibits the topping of trees on both private and city property and can result in fines of up to $10,000 per tree. The city's put a lot of work into creating this bylaw for residential areas to protect our trees because they're important. Yet here, you're potentially prepared to essentially turn a blind eye on 100 trees. Something doesn't seem right. So how about a covenant then? How about a covenant on these trees to protect them for the long term? If history is any indication in this area, any green space that will be just paved over. I understand there was a nursery that was sold and was paved over for a trucking business. I understand the city fined the company, and the Agricultural Land Commission is looking into this. We need to protect our farmland. This will be increasingly important for our food supply. So it's time to stop thinking about the short term and consider the long-term implications of these choices. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Anyone else? I'm sorry? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. I mean, the trees are a huge issue. Do you have any thoughts about the farmland that's directly beside this location?
Well, I understand it's right there, and again, when you think of the farming, we've got to protect farmland going forward. I mean, you look what's going on right now in the world with food. It's more important than ever to make sure we're protecting that. With regard to this, I don't know all the details of this development to say how much that may encroach or not. But clearly, we've got farmland there. We've got the biodiversity of the trees, which has been spoken about quite extensively. And we got to look at how to continue with all this and make it work together. Well, that's through collaboration, it was mentioned. Get the stakeholders together and let's figure out something that'll work. But everyone may not get what they want in it at the end of the day.
All right, thank you, sir. Now, I have a question of staff. As I understand it, there is, for the two buildings that are going to be built, no rezoning was required. Am I correct on that?
Through your worship to members of council, that is correct.
All right. So the trees are going to be affected now or in the future?
The trees on the CN lands would be affected now as part of this application.
All right. So if no rezoning was sought, what would be the control over those trees?
The trees would be assessed at the time of building permit application.
So it'd simply be a matter of getting a building permit.
That's correct.
So would it be fair to say that you'd end up with the same result?
Through your worship to members of council, that is a fair assessment, yes.
Or at least close to it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. To the applicant, was there anything more you wanted to add? You're okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I see we've got some questions, but I'm going to take a motion first and then we can deal with the questions.
I'll move second, third.
Moved and seconded. All right. So we've got Councillor Steves.
Thanks. I've got a question of the applicant.
All right. Mr. McPhail, do you want to join us here?
Yeah, I've got a question about the trees as to if this is approved, were you going to cut the trees right away or sometime in the future? And the reason I'm asking this, you're providing $96,000 to plant trees elsewhere. And if you were not cutting them down right away, there'd be plenty of time for some of those smaller trees to grow fairly large before these were cut down.
Our intent was to, we have to work with our arborists on there and we have to get through the nesting season and so on. They'll, you know, I suppose I'd probably be looking sometime in the fall to do site preparation work sometime around there, if that answers your question.
We would be all cutting them down this year then.
Yes, I may, you know, I don't know how long my tree cutting permit, once I get it, will be good for. I guess I could hold off on phase 2 until that time that one's built. I haven't decided at this time. It's not a peat ground, so the preload's quite small, only 2.5 meters high. And it's a short preload time too, 3 to 6 months.
Oh, I see. All right, thank you.
Councillor Day.
And my question was of staff.
Okay, we'll excuse Mr. McPhail.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize. I'm wondering, like this is a rezoning to the new, I think it's called new site-specific industrial business park and marina zoning Z120. Would it be possible to require a covenant on the property that would allow for the boatyard to remain in operation in perpetuity?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, I believe the applicant has already responded to that question. Certainly it would be council's prerogative, as this is a discretionary approval to apply that type of a covenant, but that would be at the discretion of council.
So we could make a motion and ask for that. And then my next question is, I did go out and speak to quite a few of the people at the marina and the surrounding areas, and they simply did not know that it wasn't going to be just those two buildings. Can the city reach out to all areas of the marine industry to determine the significance of the Shelter Island Marina and the Boatyard? Because from what I understand, it's very significant. Would the city be able to do that type of survey or reach out?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the applicant, as they indicated, are not intending to move forward with phases 3 to 5 at this time. They would only be proceeding with phases 1 and 2. The applicant did include phases 3 and 5 at the request of the city, so that we were rezoning and considering all of the property at that time. The direction, as I understand it, is to seek out if other marinas and other marine users understand the importance of the Shelter Island facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, the people that I spoke to today were trades, manufacturers, employees that worked there. There was, BC Boating was very concerned, everyone from the suppliers. So there's a very, very long list. I've got a few contact names for you I can give you, but they were absolutely, they were okay with the two buildings, you know, in the right conditions on the north side, but they were not okay with the Boatyard being shut down at any point.
I'm gonna interject here because we are here to hear from the public, not from a councillor or a mayor's version of events or facts that are related to them by somebody who we don't even know who it is. And secondly, I've got a question of staff about this restrictive covenant. First of all, can an applicant be forced to sign a restrictive covenant saying they're going to do something forever? Isn't that a legal question?
Through the mayor, to the mayor,
Your worship, if I might.
Yes, please. I didn't know you were here, Tony.
Yeah, it's not typical for your worship for me to provide this. However, I do think, just to bring clarity to this issue, the imposition of a covenant that imposes a positive obligation on a going concern to remain a going concern, I'm not convinced that Section 219 of the Land Title Act contemplates that or permits that. It's one thing to impose a positive obligation, but Section 219 is really focused on use, not on the obligation of a business to remain in business. So I do think that is something that I'm not convinced at this time it would fall within the parameters of what Section 219 of the Land Titles Act permits.
All right. Did you want to add anything? No? All right, Council Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be mentioning a few things here that were related to things that were shared by the public a little bit earlier today. Also, just want to highlight again how valuable it is that Councillor Day was able to connect with many people who are not here, but are members of the public.
I think we've been through that, and we're here to hear from the public who responds to us.
Okay. Okay, then the next thing I'll mention is I think this is a multi-phase light industrial development that needs more time for it to come to fruition and bring about that high standard that's been met so far by the owners and operators to reach that 4 anchor rating with the Georgia Strait Alliance. And I think by approving this as it stands today, there's so much uncertainty within it. There's so many areas of lack of public consultation, which is why we don't have the public writing about this, because they don't know. I live in Hamilton, not far from this. Many of my neighbors had no clue that this would be impacting their recreational area. One of the few places to go in Hamilton, East Richmond, is to walk along the river. And one of those locations is actually by along the trail right in front of this area where a majority of the trees will be cut as if this gets approved tonight. And I think there's, sure, maybe thanks to the legal opinion, maybe a covenant is not the way to go. But what we heard from the public is there's nowhere in the city where we protect cottonwood and birch trees. There's only more of those to go because of city diking operations, which I'm not opposed to. But when we have to remove trees because it could compromise our dike, then yeah, that's great. But we have lots of talk about, oh, we're going to do habitat compensation one day somewhere. Well, this is the exact location for that to happen, because these trees are not going to compromise the dike. They're on the land side of the riparian area. So this is the exact type of area the city should be seeking for acquisition, or to work with the developer to say, hey, you preserve that. That's the type of habitat compensation that we need. And these trees do not hang over where workers are. These hang over the water. They're right on the slope on the land side of the ditch or the riparian area. So to pass this today, we lose this opportunity, and I'd have to say it's one of the last opportunities where there's a large grove of trees that provide this type of ecological benefit. Directly out from the land, out to Dawn and Lion Islands, that's simply the approach that it seems we're taking as a city and as the private landowners. We're pushing everything away from the island, and we're completely removing all ecological features. And we've just signed up to be like this bee city and bat friendly this and bird friendly that, but it's all for nothing if we continue to erode as business as usual, and that's what we're doing today. We're going against many of the previous strategies and things that we've proclaimed and signed up to. I think Mr. McPhail's son has a great potential ahead of him to develop this when we have the solar PV policy in place that we approved earlier at GP, and many other things that will come. But to approve it as it stands today, I think is wrong in ecological ways, in neighborhood ways. It's not getting us to a better place. We have so many areas where people work and frequent in this area that will be completely disrupted, and it'll be too late. Tonight is the last night, and I agree with the mayor. There's not a lot of public here to tell us that, but that doesn't mean that we ignore what we've heard in the past or what we are aware of through our council and mayor communicating with members of the public or societies or those who have offered us solutions that we have right in front of us, but we're blindly, I think, going by, approving what might look like just a phase 1, 2, but 3, 4, 5, I'm sure are within short order. And this is an area I frequent. I've used the businesses in there, and I have to say, like Councillor Day mentioned, you have to go a long ways away to find the services that are provided there right now. And I did hear Mr. McPhail's presentation and letter that he submitted to us, and I think there's lots of clarifications that have been made to us, but that hasn't reached the public. And this hasn't been a news story in the local paper. Nobody knows about it. And I'm completely unsatisfied with any type of approval for any phase of this at this moment. So that's why I'm opposed. Thanks.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you to everyone that's come out and spoken on this. I think it's good to hear from everybody, of course. And, I've heard from a few people that there's concern that the marina will continue operating. My understanding is that, yes, as a city, we can't force somebody else to be in business. We could offer, I suppose, to buy the business and run a public marina, but I don't think that's possibly in contemplation of what we're thinking of doing. What I've also heard is that there's 110 high-risk trees that are in poor or medium health. I had an interesting talk with Michael Wiebe from the Greens from Vancouver the other day, and he said one of the great things about his party is they've got
Councillor, I've stopped the others from giving us the version from someone else, so you better just keep it to your personal knowledge, please.
Well, it is my personal knowledge. He just mentioned that the value of having an arborist on his team to suggest that when they can see that a tree is getting old, and that replacing it now makes sense because that tree will die soon. It makes it easier for them to make the decision. We've had arborists look at these properties. We've had the arborist weigh in on it. It's a third-party person talking about it. The new trees will have a longer life, that it'll have time to regenerate. They'll be in more appropriate places. And it seems to me that this applicant can go ahead with this without going through this process. So staff had recommended, if I understand correctly, staff had recommended that this go through this bigger process to encompass all the changes that they're eventually looking to make so that all the road dedications and everything could happen now. Is that correct?
To staff?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, that is correct in that we did request the applicant to undertake that fuller assessment of the long-term use of the property, including those future phases of development.
So it's actually the applicant trying to ensure the continuation of having a marina that is why this whole process is going through this way.
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, the proposal under the existing zoning, the zoning boundaries are treated as property lines. So in order to have the configuration that they were looking for, rezoning helped to simplify matters. The rezoning, and then as I had indicated before, we did ask the applicant to then look at the additional properties on the future phases.
Okay, so this should have been a bit of a slam dunk for them because of the way staff had requested this. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rao.
Yes, Worship, I have a question both to the applicant and to staff. I don't know if there are ways to mitigate the impact on the trees, because as I look at the figures, right, we are talking about 130 trees, and then 110 of them will be removed, and only 17 will be retained and protected. So we're talking about a very major removal of trees, whether or not they are going to be replaced. I don't know how urgent is the development plan. If there's time, I would like that the applicant and staff would have further talks about how to mitigate the number of trees to be affected, trying to keep the most of it. I remember that when we talked about the polygon project on Tasman Park, and then again in the beginning, a large number of trees are proposed to be cut, and at the end, we're able to save a large number at the end. So I want to ask staff and the applicant, how possible is that to mitigate?
Well, let's ask staff first.
Through your worship to Councillor Au, the trees that are being removed, they were carefully assessed through the rezoning process. The trees are Cottonwood, alder, and birch, identified in poor to moderate health. As part of this rezoning application, the city is securing a 2-to-1 replacement ratio for all of those trees, which results in a required planting of 227 trees. The applicant is providing new trees as part of the redevelopment of the first phase and second phase. The second phase is subject to a development permit that will also address and include tree planting along the north side of the site through a detailed landscape plan that will be required as part of the development permit process.
Is that what you wanted?
No, I mean, doesn't answer my question.
Okay. Councillor Steves.
Thanks, Your Worship. I will be supporting the proposal. I think the solution on the trees is a good one. It's unfortunate we have to cut trees down, but I'm no lover of cottonwood trees. At one time, we had a city policy of cutting all the cottonwood trees down that we could. In the forest and in the woods, and some up in the interior wherever we have them, and in the coastal forests, people cut them down. They call them widowmakers. Loggers walking underneath, they fall on you. They fall on buildings. Maybe nobody remembers the Britannia shipyard 20 years ago. It was just covered with cottonwood trees. We had them 4 feet in diameter. And they were falling down, and we cut them all down. We replaced them with fairly mature trees, and you never know they were there 20 years later. So if we're cutting down cottonwoods, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a good thing. Yes, They do provide habitat for birds and bugs and things like that in the dying trees. But getting rid of the cottonwoods, in my opinion, is not a bad thing. The trees will be replaced, and I notice there's $96,000 for replacement trees that can't be done on the site. And they, I believe, would be able to be planted somewhere in the city. We can on city streets. I'm not sure where the planning is, but we do need a tree canopy in the city. And certainly, the best thing we could have, best places we could have trees is all our city streets with the heat domes that we're getting and the hot weather. Trees have a cooling effect on houses and homes and on people. And the more money we've got to build trees in the urban area, the better. So I think that's a good solution as well. I asked the question about timing because we have 4 Hollywood trees in our yard. And of course, Hollywood trees are disliked just like cottonwoods are because they spread all over the place. And anyway, they got Hollywood. They got holly disease about 15 years ago. So we planted 10 apple trees to replace them. We haven't cut the holly trees down yet, but the apple trees are now almost mature. It doesn't take long to grow an apple tree, 15 years. And we've got 10 replacement trees to take down those 4 holly trees. So I think, and the apple trees will last a long time. They last 100 years. Cottonwoods, by the way, are one reason of the worst tree. They grow very fast. They grow very big. And and in our soils, that's one of the worst places to grow them is in the estuary because they absorb moisture through the roots into the tree, and they rot from the inside. And you can't tell that tree is rotten until it either falls down on a house or on a person, or you cut it down. And basically, you'll find that that's why they've just determined that most of these cottonwood trees are in poor health. That $96,000 worth of trees can be conifers or deciduous trees that will last 100 years, and they will not be a danger to the public and will not die from poor health in a short term. So I think the solution is a good one, and I support it.
Councillor Hobbs.
Oh, thank you, and through the chair. I'll be supporting the application before us. This is actually, in some ways, other than the trees, pretty straightforward. This is an industrial site, a light industrial site, and the application is seeking to combine 3 contiguous zoning areas into one site-specific industrial business park in Marina. And that will allow multi-phase development of the site, which is what we've already discussed with the early development. You know, it's amazing, actually, all the positive things that are happening out of this. If you look at the attachment 8 in the report, there's 7 pages of rezoning requirements. Some of the highlights have been mentioned, but I'm going to mention them again because the public should know, and the public maybe hasn't read the report. There's a 5-meter ALR buffer and landscaping area next to the ALR land. And I have talked to the farmers in the area, actually, and they are happy with that. That's my knowledge. The 110 trees being replaced. Phase 1, from reading this, I believe it's 46 trees. They're going to be 4 meters tall with either a 6 or 8 inch, I think, diameter. So those aren't saplings. Those are quite big. And as we've just heard, they're going to be, many of them are coniferous or deciduous, and they're going to be quite healthy trees with almost $100,000 going towards more trees, almost $50,000 going towards public art, 12 EV charging stations, rooftop solar panels in the common areas in the landlord's building, and that's going to be roughed in for the other warehouses as well, which is a really good thing, and tenants can decide whether they're going to have that when the conduits are there. We just talked about solar panels earlier tonight. The buildings themselves are going to be a minimum 10% more effective in terms of energy consumption. There's going to be all kinds of other improvements with sidewalks and fire hydrants and dike improvements. Most importantly, or not most importantly, but also importantly, industrial land is also a major issue in Metro Vancouver. And if you want to talk about food supply, if you want to talk about shortening supply chains,
and all that type of thing, you have to include industrial land in the discussion. This is light industrial, and if you read the Metro Vancouver Growth Strategy 2050, it specifically says in section 2.2, and this is a quote, "Protect the supply and enhance the efficient use of industrial land," end of quote. So I will be supporting this. It was mentioned earlier today, or this evening, about, not wanting businesses to shut down and that type of thing, which I don't see any evidence or indication of that. What I do see is an application that actually enables an employer and an industrial land area to actually better ensure the longevity of the businesses that are there. That's what this development will be. It's not changing the use of this land. This land is light industrial. We're not taking ALR land and doing anything with it. We're enhancing the ability of the applicant to make better use of light industrial land. And yes, some trees are going to come down in that process. And one of the things I've been impressed with on council is the rigorous, robust bylaw and requirements we have on tree replacements. And that's been discussed just by Councillor Steves ahead of me. So I will be supporting this. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councillor Day, you've already spoken.
Yeah, I have a motion to refer this back, please, Mayor Brody.
Okay.
The
And
motion.
is it seconded? It's seconded.
This is a motion to refer back to staff, the Farrell Estates proposal by Mr. McPhail for a multi-phase industrial business park and marina to do a comprehensive public consultation with key stakeholders such as the fishing fleet operators, pleasure craft operators and services, marine suppliers, trades, BC boating, and employees who work at the Shelter Island Marina. And I wanted to correct a couple things that were wrong because I spent a couple hours there today.
Well, no, we're talking about the merits of referral.
Yeah.
We do have this, yes, that's apparently the motion to refer.
Yes.
Which has been seconded. I hope you don't expect us to inhale this. I mean, having been given to us literally this second.
Well, I finished at the Boatyard at 3:30, so I
Well,
didn't
that
have
could
enough
be,
time.
but you had this for an hour or two.
Okay,
And
right.
we didn't. So anyway,
So-
on the merits of referral
Yes.
only.
Yes, so the reason I would like to send this back for consultation is because, Councillor Hobbs just mentioned that the businesses are not going to be displaced. It's not actually correct. In front, if you look at the north side of the property, there's all these very large temporary buildings.
This is on the merits of referral.
And none of these people knew that there was anything more than those two buildings. And each one of them was told that by Christmas, they have to move their big structures forward to the yellow line, which is at the front of where they are. So their back of the building has to be to where the front of the building is now. So they are going to be moved into the Boatyard. Then everyone who's in front of them will be moved forward, and so someone's got to go. And so this will affect employment, it'll affect economics, because this Boatyard brings in millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of revenue every year. And this referral to get true consultation. When I spoke to Mr. Haynes, Mr. Bruce Haynes from BC Boating, he didn't know anything about it. And he was very concerned about losing any of the services because he told me, Mr.
Listen, we've been through this, okay?
Okay, so-
You're not gonna quote anybody.
I won't quote anybody. I understand that
Okay.
if you don't service boats, they're unsafe. People are going to go out anyhow. You got to get the proper
All
consultation.
right, I'm gonna call the question on referral. All those in favor? I see Councillor Wolf, Councillor Day. All those opposed? Everyone else is opposed except the two of them. It is defeated. I'm calling the question on the main motion. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried with Councillors Day and Wolf opposed. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Item 5, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 10190. The location is Spires Road area. The applicant is the City of Richmond, and the purpose is to designate the Spires Road Market Rental Policy Area as Urban Center T5 in subarea B2 mixed-use, mid-rise residential and limited commercial, and to establish a rental tenure overlay and supporting policies which outline density increases associated with secured rental tenure for properties in and adjacent to Spires Road, as described in the report titled Referral Response Spires Road Area Proposed Rental Tenure and Density Increases. First reading was on June 27th.
Okay, now, the city of Richmond is the applicant. So do you want to say a few words about this one, Mr. Craig? One of the others, Mr. Hopkins?
Yeah, to your worship, I'll ask Mr. Steve Gawley to provide a brief summary of the proposed Spires Road bylaw amendments, and he will use the graphic on page PH 116 in your agenda package, and with your permission, we can also share that graphic on Zoom.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to share it. Who did you say is going to address
Mr.
this?
Steve Gawley, Program Manager of Policy Planning.
Okay. Welcome.
So, Your Worship and members of council, the proposed bylaw amendments outline a rental tenure policy that increases the provision of rental housing above the current low-end market rental or LEMUR program requirements and the OCP's current rental housing policy requirements for the Spires Road area. As shown on the screen, the proposed policy approach introduces a minimum 2.0 FAR for the Spires Road area, provided that the maximum residential strata is 1.2 FAR, which is in line with the existing entitlement under the high-density townhouse designation for the area in the current city center area plan. Of the 2.0 FAR, the minimum rental housing secured is proposed to be 0.8 FAR with the condition that at least 50% of the units are secured for LEMUR housing and the remainder for market rental housing, unless specified by council to have a different mix of rental housing. To secure additional affordable housing, the proposed policy would permit densities to a maximum of 3.0 FAR, provided that this additional density is entirely for affordable housing through a mix of LEMUR and market rental units. The proposed policy would greatly increase the provision of affordable housing in the Spires Road area through a mix of low, mid, and high-rise buildings at higher densities than what is currently permitted in the city center area plan. The proposed bylaw amendments were referred to the school district and presented to the Urban Development Institute at a June 21st meeting, with no specific concerns being raised by either organization. As the proposed Spires Road rental tenure policy is being initiated early in the process for updating the official community plan, should the bylaw amendment be adopted, staff are proposing to monitor the policy's implementation and report back to council in a year's time. In summary, staff are recommending updating the OCP and the city center area plan to include the proposed Spires Road rental tenure policy. With that high-level overview of the proposed bylaw amendments, staff are available to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. I think we can take that down for the moment. So, written submissions, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. In addition to previously distributed correspondence, there are two on-table letters, one from Ms. Mary Rogers and the second one from Paige Robertson, both expressing concerns.
All right. Councilor McNulty, your hand is up.
Question to staff.
Okay, go ahead. And then we're going to go to the public.
Interpretation. On our, excuse me, on our page 117, if I wanted, just for the sake of argument, to build a tower there, and let's just say it's 200 units, how would I apply? Would I be able to sell any of those units outright? If I was to do 200 units, I'd have to have 100 of them for rental, but could I sell the other 100?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, if you had a 200-unit proposal, well, essentially, I guess the way to look at it is, yes, you would have your 1.2 FAR is your strata, although it's subject to the affordable housing policies and the market rental policy, but the remainder is strata that could be sold as individual units. And most likely the market rental and the affordable housing units may end up being packaged as a strata on its own that would be sold to a housing provider or nonprofit to manage.
What I'm getting at on that, and I appreciate that, and I think I want to go back on it though. Could I sell them to individuals and not be run by a strata unit. The rental, I know what we can do with. No problem, I know how it's gonna be, but what about if, I just picked 200, just to make, for argument's sake, and there's another 100 available. They couldn't be sold individually to individual people?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, the strata units could be sold to individual property or investors or residents.
Okay, because I think there's a bit of misnomer and a bit of a lack of understanding of what this particular comes out with the rental tenure and the overlay of the rental tenure, that it all has to be rental. And I think it's important because I know a number of the residents are wondering, you're going to make all our places all rental, and the value of my property is going to go down, etc. So I was looking how to apply the first 10 lines on page 117 and what that actually meant. So it does mean that following the rules, you still can have market rental, but you also can have apartments for sale if indeed I was to build an apartment of some. It might not be that many, but I still could do it. And that's what I wanted clarification on. Thank you, Your Worship. I hope I'm right.
That's basically in that pink area on
Yes.
that chart.
Yeah, correct.
Part
Okay.
of
Thank you.
that 1.2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your worship, that's correct. And one last thing I just wanted to add is Mr. Gawley also mentioned the same strata entitlement is still carried over into this new policy from the existing stacked townhouse policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, doke. So, we don't have anybody pre-registered. Is there anybody here wishing to speak to us on this item on the agenda? Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3. So I'll start with you, sir. And then go over to this side and then this gentleman.
Your Worship and Council, my name is Jose Gonzalez. I don't represent any organization here. I'm a resident of the Spires Road area. My address is 8935 Cook Crescent. I've lived there with my family over 25 years. And I share much of the pain that other residents do with the cost of housing, having 2 adult children living at home. That said, I provided a submission. I'm not going to review the entire submission because I don't need to repeat myself. I assume that council and you may have read the submission. So 2 main things that I wanted to cover off as updates. The city clerk did convey my concerns about the massively overgrown ditches. And I heard back from staff that they have a 7-year program to clear ditches. The last time the ditches were cleaned in this area was 2017. They were inspected in September of last year, and the staff review says that the risk of flooding from clogged ditches, they don't expect any quote-unquote major blockages. So at this point, from a flooding point of view, my comments in my submission, I'm satisfied that staff have done their due diligence and have looked at that. However, the impact of the negligent owners, landlords, and tenants that I mentioned in my submission, and the fact that the bylaws only deal with tall grass. So staff have repeatedly looked at whether it's the foot-deep plus ruts that are on the boulevards, or whether it's the completely covered, and I counted in my walk, 13 properties in our neighborhood have the boulevards completely covered by brambles, bushes. Basically, you can't walk through it. You can't get off the road onto the boulevard. There are no sidewalks in this area, just so council is aware. So if you want to walk in the neighborhood, you're walking on the road, and when cars come by, you get off onto the boulevard. So whether you're a resident walking in the area or whether you're children going to Cook School, that's how you get to school. These overgrown brambles and bushes and the ruts in the area basically make it either impossible or unsafe to walk, to get off the road onto the boulevard. So residents are dodging cars in this area. Again, I respectfully suggest that bylaws should have something in them to require owners and tenants to not abandon the maintenance on their landscaping and to maintain their boulevards. That's one of the points. The other one is around the pilot project. While I completely respect that the for market housing can be built, the consultation that was done and that's listed in the report was not based on this policy that's coming forward. The consultation was based on the current 1.2 being what was going to be allowed, and then as a bonus, that was the way it was phrased, would additional density, what would residents think if additional density was provided when a developer came forward and said, we're going to build in your area and we're going to put in market or low-end market rentals. That was the consultation that came forward. It's really not clear why that's changed, but what this policy is proposing is that if this pilot is liked by council, then that the development will not be able to go ahead unless there is a minimum of some amount of market rental and low-end market rental in every development. I believe, and I've talked to Mr. Gali, so I'm not completely clear on what the percent of rentals required. I believe it's around 55% of units have to be rental units. And my understanding is that if this pilot project is liked by council, this will be rolled out to other areas of Richmond. So we will have mandatory rentals throughout Richmond. That was not the consultation that came forward. And I suggest that the project should follow what was proposed in the original consultation, which is a bonusing for developers to see if that's enough of an incentive for developers to build market and low-end market rentals. I would love to see lower cost housing for my kids and for the rest of Richmond. My concern is this is picking this area arbitrarily and basically starting something that will then roll out to Richmond in a way that will cause a lot of backlash. And for myself as a resident, I do not support this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll go to the gentleman at the back.
Excuse me, I'm going to speak for Rav.
As you wish. Sure.
Good evening. Wayne Fougere, 2425 Quebec Street, Vancouver. I'm an architect. I've done several projects in Richmond over the years, and one of my clients with me tonight, Rav Baines, has some property in the Spires area, is interested in it, and we've talked of the area a lot. We support the idea of adding the rental. We think that staff has done a good job. They've made it perhaps much easier for local developers to develop rental. I'm not a developer, but I've heard from my client that it's much easier when you have a larger portion of rental in the building to make it worthwhile. The only thing that probably the plan is missing and that would be helpful is a tendency to allow smaller developments in the Spires area than it appears the plan supports. There's a large area east of Cook that looks like it needs to be assembled with the east leg of Spires Road being consumed. And I know that was an intent to deal with the properties on the east side against Garden City. But we think that there's a need to offer the possibility that smaller developers can develop. Mr. Baines has an interest in 3 properties south of the intersection of Cook and Spires. And he would be interested in developing a pilot project under this, this program that would be as close to 3 FSRs as he could get. It would be governed, of course, by parking, which is always a major issue for density. But in all, and I think I've said enough now, but we think staff's done a great job. Thank you.
All right, we do have a couple questions here. Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thanks. Wayne, maybe you can answer this question for me. I know you're not the developer.
Oh,
but,
just hang on, Harold. I'll come right back to you unless you've got a question for this.
No, I've got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is that I've been approached by people who live there who are concerned that their property values are going to go down. Your client is a developer, and obviously he thinks the property values may rise. Is that correct, or will they go up, or will they go down, or will they stay the same?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I believe my client believes the value is in a higher density in the area. And rental housing is important. It's needed, and this is a good place to put it. Plus, the density that they have now for ownership is not changing. It's still remaining at 1.2 FAR. So I don't see the values decreasing at all, but I'm only an architect. I draw pretty pictures, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now, Councillor Day, is this a question of the delegation? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So your client has got property south of Cook Road, so actually not part of this area.
No, I'm sorry, Cook Crescent, the one, Spires is first, and then there's a.
Oh, so it's
Cook
in
Crescent,
the square?
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay, and the problem is he's only got 3 properties and you feel that?
It's not a problem, I don't think.
No.
If you want Concord to come in and buy up all the land east of Cook Crescent, that could probably happen. But when? 20 years, maybe?
Yeah.
Whenever they can assemble it all. Instead, you're going to find smaller developers who can put together 3, 4. Actually, on the south side of Spires right now, there are 9 lots. The 3 that Mr. Baines controls are right in the middle. So if his pilot project goes forward and it works, then it also works to the east and to the west. So, there's 9 lots, 3 developments at 3 FSR, if we can achieve that.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor McNulty, is a question of this delegation?
Yeah, if I can. Through you to Wayne. Thanks very much, Wayne. I appreciate what you put on the table, and I would like to see smaller developments as well. I guess my question is, what are we talking about in addition to which that would be different than just townhomes? Right now, all we've got is townhomes there, and we're going to be a village of townhomes if we don't watch it. So are we talking a smaller project of 3 lots, sort of like 6 stories, 40 units or 50 units? Is that what you're implying? I'm not asking specific, just sort of getting the lay of the land, so to speak.
Okay. So technically, the way FAR works in Richmond, with the small amount of deductions that you're permitted, like some staircases and such, you need just a little over 50% site coverage in 6 stories of residential, and you'll get a 3 FSR.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you for that answer. Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Your Worship. Thanks for being here, and that's interesting. On the parking issue that you mentioned, what would be a parking ratio? We've talked about that a lot, and I have a number in my mind. What do you think would be a good low parking ratio for an area like that?
I don't think I can answer it. I think, city center has the 1.2 for apartments, 1.2 cars per unit plus 0.2 visitor. Rental has, you're going to have to correct me, I think it's 0.8 cars per unit for rental. And I don't know if Lemur units have a bit less. All I know is that in every project I've done where you only have one level of parking, it's a struggle. Parking always controls how much floor area you have, depending on the size of the units. If they were all 3-bedroom, 1,500 square foot homes, there'd be lots of room for parking. But when you're trying to do a 2-bedroom at 800 square feet, it gets more complicated. You get more units, so you need more cars.
And one more question, if you don't mind, Your Worship, and I think you can comment on this, because you talked about it, I believe. The 0.8 density going from 1.2 to 2.0 being essentially mandatory, if I'm understanding it correctly, You seem to be comfortable with that, or am I misinterpreting what you said?
I don't see a problem personally with it, but in our conversations about a potential project on the site, we'd actually try to get to 3.0.
Sure.
At the moment, we've only been able to get up to 2.8, but with a little bit of squeezing and pushing, I'm sure we'll get to 3.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And just before we go to our other delegation, there was something I meant to mention as a result of Mr. Gonzalez, and it's to staff. It sounds like there's some real issues in terms of pedestrian access along boulevards, encroachment by, invasive plants and all that. Could that be referred to our bylaw people or the relevant people to take a look at that, go to the neighborhood, take a look at it, and to take steps as necessary under the circumstances, please?
To your worship, definitely can be. My understanding as a community safety committee last week, there was a referral to bylaws to do just that.
Oh, was there? Okay. All right, well, maybe you could reinforce it then.
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Dickey. Oh, as you're coming up, Councillor McPhail, did you have something before Mr.
I just
Dickey?
wanted to share with you that at Community Safety, Councillor Hobbs added Mr. Gonzalez's letter to the agenda, and there was a referral. So item number 1 of his letter, A to E, which has to do with bylaws, was all referred to staff, and I believe that has precipitated some of the work that Mr. Gonzalez spoke about, and obviously there needs to be more follow-up from other departments.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Jerome Dickey, 299280 Glen Ellen Drive. The current zoning proposal may seem like a big step for rental housing, but it's a very tiny one during a housing crisis. It is simply not enough. For over 10 years, we've watched almost endless building of luxury strata condos and haven't built rental supply. The housing crisis is worse than ever. You have a choice and something that needs to change. That's your job. Simply requiring some rentals and yet more expensive luxury new housing is more of the same. The answer here is rental tenure zoning to pre-zone land for 100% rental, which caps its value and lets rental housing developers come in who want to be in the rental business. This area is a perfect example of an area for rental tenure zoning because it's an upzoning from single family, so it's financially beneficial for the single family owners moving out of the neighborhood. And it's in the city center, close to transit, which means we can get the density we need for residents who can't afford to purchase. Anyone who refers to this as downsizing is wrong. The neighborhood will be rezoned to greater density. That's happening anyhow. So the single family owners will get more of their homes than equivalent homes in an area not designated for multifamily. So whether it be upzoning to rental tenure or upzoning to strata townhouses or condos, these residents have hit the jackpot financially compared to an owner in an area not being upzoned. Under the OCP, this area is designated already for multifamily. Rental tenure zoning provides economies of scale in managing the rental units to keep rents down. Large efficient rental managers are not interested in buildings that are less than 100% rental. This also provides much more stability for renters, which they don't get from ad hoc condo rentals, subject to the changing needs of individual landlords. That's important for families. John Ralston has provided much information on how rental tenure zoning can move Richmond forward in a very positive direction to increase rentals that are available. This is what we need for Richmond, and it's a huge step forward. So I ask, what's stopping each of you from making this 100% rental tenure?
All right, thank you very much, sir. Councillor Day, was this a question of this gentleman?
That we should zone the Spires area 100% rental tenure as opposed to townhouses or condos. This is the ones that have already been approved in the area. Do you think that would blend well? These are mostly luxury townhouses. Do you think that it would blend well to have the rest of it as 100% rental tenure? And
Well, if those are already there, then yes, around it, you've got to build, but the key is not mixing I believe, the rentals with condos to make it specifically for rentals, the development themselves.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, so, anybody else? Okay, so we will go to council consideration. Someone want to move something?
Second, third.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on that? Okay, all those in, okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to speak briefly to this. So I'm not a member of the planning committee, and that's, I think, where there was a slight maybe error in this process. I think if the referral back then would have included staff to look at options for 100% rental, we would have had a different amendment to the bylaw to approve tonight at this public hearing. Because we were not, our committee was not explicit asking staff to look into that option, we didn't get that as a potential at council to then get at this public hearing. As the last delegate spoke, that what we're approving tonight is somewhat of a tiny step during a housing crisis, and there was much more potential that could have been made of this. But still, I do support this tiny step because it is in the right direction, and it does kind of lead to potential major changes when the OCP, the official community plan, goes through referral, pending the success of this pilot. And I think part of the success would come if the land is treated uniformly, or all of the non-luxury townhouse area of Spires would get the same zoning. We have received a number of letters from people who feel like someone's going to be left out or someone's going to get certain zoning versus the neighbor, and that's not fair. And I agree that that is going to create a challenge and is going to make this pilot fairly difficult. We also heard from a delegate today, an architect on behalf of a developer who's willing to make a go of this and to see how we can use some innovative solutions to provide more rental, and to hear, I was very pleased to hear the words from them say that we need rental. It's important, and this is the area for it. I think almost everyone has said that this is a great area for rental, but it's going to be a challenge with this pilot because we haven't given that blanket coverage over the whole area. And I did oppose the townhouse developments that have come up during this term because I could see that we're approving and doing this piecemeal approach. And the other big component is we don't have park space allocated anywhere within the Spires Road area yet. It's still kind of, we'll see where it lands. And so we're not, I feel, doing the right by the long-standing neighbors, the current property owners, and the future residents of Richmond who are struggling to find a way to become a resident or stay here as a resident. So in that vein, I will support this item tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Brody. I had hoped that this area could be 100% rental tenure because I just think it's perfectly suited for it, being so close to the SkyTrain. But I give great credit to Rollo and Associates, and particularly our own staff, for coming up with something that is palatable to council and has a better chance of passing. As Councillor Wolf said, this is kind of, baby steps, but at least it's doing something, and we have to accomplish something. I don't like when I read in the the data that in Richmond, 18.9% of our starts were rental between January and March 2022, and 81.1% were condos. In contrast to that, Delta was 100% rental. In contrast to that, Surrey was 52% rental, Vancouver 42% rental. So I wouldn't say I'm particularly proud of this, but at least we're going in the right direction, and listening to the developers come forward and say they can make this work, well, that gives me encouragement. So I will be supporting this.
All right, we're going to call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And that's moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Someone move adjournment. Someone move adjournment. Sorry?
Your worship, we do have one more item.
Oh, we do. We do. I'm totally ahead of myself, as usual. Thank you. Thank you. We can just pass the next one too. Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. It's item 6, official community plan amendment bylaw number 10364 for the location citywide. The applicant is City of Richmond, and the purpose is to amend the development permit guidelines regarding the use of design approaches that improve the energy performance of buildings. First reading was on June 13th.
Okay, Richmond is the applicant. Anything we want to say about it?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. Happy to answer questions.
Okay. Any written submissions?
None, Your Worship.
Anybody here wanting to speak on this item?
Second, third.
Moved and seconded. Discussion, all those in favor, any opposed, that's carried, and adoption is moved and seconded. All those in favor, any opposed, that is carried. Now move adjournment. Thank you, we're now adjourned.